Step out of the vehicle, ma'am, now. The voice cut through the low hum of diesel engines and distant highway noise, sharp enough to turn heads across the rest stop, and Danielle Brooks didn't move right away, her hand still resting on the worn steering wheel of her 18-wheeler as the dashboard lights cast a soft green glow across her knuckles, steady, unshaken. While outside the cold white fluorescence flickered against the asphalt, and two patrol cars idled behind her rig like silent witnesses, their light bars dark but present, waiting, watching. Officer Ryan Keller stood just off her driver's side door, one hand resting near his belt, posture rigid, eyes narrowed not in anger but certainty, the kind that came from thinking you already knew the whole story before it began. And beside him Officer Jake Morrison shifted his weight, glancing briefly at the truck's license plate, then back at Danielle's silhouette through the glass. "You hear me?" Ryan added, louder now, a knock following against the metal door, firm but controlled. Danielle finally exhaled, slow, measured, then reached for the handle, the door creaking open as she climbed down the steps one at a time, boots hitting the pavement with a quiet, grounded sound, her reflective vest catching the overhead light, her face calm, unreadable, like she had stepped into this moment long before it ever arrived. "Evening, officers," she said, voice even, neither warm nor cold, just present. Ryan studied her for a second longer than necessary, eyes scanning, calculating. "Mind telling us why you've been parked here for over 45 minutes? He asked, the question simple on the surface, but heavy underneath. Danielle glanced briefly toward the dark stretch of highway beyond the rest stop, then back at him. "Taking a break," she replied, her tone steady, factual. "Logbook says I'm allowed." Jake let out a quiet breath through his nose, almost a scoff, but not quite that. "So," he muttered, shifting again. Ryan stepped a little closer, not aggressive, just enough to close the space. "We've had reports," he said, pausing just long enough for the words to settle. "Suspicious activity. Truck matching your description." Danielle didn't react, not outwardly, but her eyes moved once, quick, precise, toward the far edge of the lot where a dark SUV sat parked under a flickering light, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Then back to Ryan. "I see," she said quietly, a beat passing, the kind that stretched just enough to feel like something was about to break, but didn't. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of gasoline and hot rubber. A distant semi roared past on the interstate, its sound fading into the night. Ryan tilted his head slightly, watching her, waiting for something, nervousness, hesitation, anything. But she gave him none, just stood there, shoulders relaxed, breathing even, present in a way that felt almost deliberate. "We're gonna need to take a look inside," he said finally, the decision landing like it had already been made long before he spoke it. Danielle held his gaze for a moment, then nodded once, slow, controlled. "If that's what you need to do," she answered, and for a split second, something in Ryan's expression flickered, not doubt, not yet, but something closer to curiosity, like a question he hadn't planned on asking had just begun forming without his permission, and somewhere behind them, unnoticed by most, the SUV's engine turned over once, then went still again, waiting. "Pop the trailer doors," Ryan said, his tone flatter now, less about asking and more about confirming control, and Danielle did not hesitate as she reached into her pocket, pulling out a small ring of keys that caught the overhead light with a faint metallic glint, her movements precise, unhurried, like each second was already accounted for somewhere deeper than the moment itself. She walked toward the back of the truck with steady steps, boots pressing softly against the pavement, while Jake followed a few paces behind, his radio crackling briefly before going quiet again, the night air cooler here away from the idling engines, carrying a low hum that seemed to settle into the bones of the place. Danielle stopped at the rear doors, sliding the key into the lock with a soft click, then paused just long enough to glance once more across the lot, her eyes landing on the same dark SUV, still parked, still silent. Then back to the lock as she turned it, the heavy latch releasing with a dull metallic sound. She pulled one door open, then the other, revealing rows of sealed cargo containers stacked neatly inside, the faint scent of cardboard and plastic drifting out into the night. Ryan stepped closer, peering in, his eyes scanning quickly, too quickly, like he was searching for confirmation. Rather than truth, step aside, he said, and Danielle did. Without protest, moving just enough to give him space while keeping her posture relaxed, her hands visible, calm. Jake climbed up onto the trailer edge, boots thudding softly against the metal floor as he crouched near the nearest container, running his hand along its surface, checking labels, seals, anything that might justify the suspicion already written into their approach. All looked standard, Jake muttered, though his voice carried a hint of uncertainty he did not fully hide. Ryan did not respond. Instead, he circled slightly, his gaze shifting between Danielle and the open trailer, measuring something he could not quite define. "You haul this route often?" he asked, casual on the surface, probing underneath. Danielle nodded once. "Twice a week," she said, her voice even. "Same schedule, same stops." Ryan watched her as if the answer itself was not what mattered, but how she gave it, the stillness in her tone, the absence of defensiveness. It did not fit the pattern he expected, and that made it harder to place her, harder to close the box he had already built in his mind. Jake tapped on one of the containers, then another, the hollow sounds echoing lightly inside the trailer. "You mind if we open one?" he asked, glancing back. Danielle met his eyes briefly, then gave a small nod. "Go ahead," she said, and again. There was no resistance, no hesitation, just permission, clean and simple. Jake pried open a container seal, lifting the lid to reveal tightly packed electronic components, neatly arranged. Untouched, he shifted a few items, checked underneath, then exhaled quietly. "Nothing here," he said, a little louder this time. Ryan stepped up beside him, looking down into the container, then back at Danielle, something in his jaw tightening, just slightly. Not frustration exactly, but something close to it. Like the absence of evidence was creating more tension than finding something ever would. Danielle stood a few feet away, the light catching the side of her face. Her expression unchanged, but her eyes moved once more, quick and deliberate, toward that distant SUV, then back, and if Ryan noticed, he did not say. Not yet. The wind shifted again, a loose piece of paper skittering across the asphalt somewhere behind them. And in that quiet, stretched space between action and understanding, the feeling settled in, subtle, but growing, that this stop, this moment, was not unfolding the way it was supposed to. "Run her name again," Ryan said quietly, not looking at Jake, but at Danielle, his eyes narrowing just enough to suggest that something no longer fit the version of events he had already decided on. Jake glanced down at his handheld device, thumb moving across the screen as the faint blue light reflected against his face. "Already did," he replied. "Commercial license checks out. No warrants, no flags." The words hung there, flat, incomplete, like they should have settled the situation but instead made it heavier. Ryan stepped down from the trailer, boots landing with a soft thud, his gaze never leaving Danielle. "That does not mean anything," he said under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. Danielle shifted her weight slightly, just enough to ease the pressure on one foot, her hands still relaxed at her sides, her breathing steady, the kind of calm that did not try to prove anything, did not need to, the kind that simply existed, and that was what unsettled him most. "You said you run this route twice a week," Ryan continued, circling a few steps closer. "You always stop here this long?" Danielle met his gaze without hesitation. "Depends on the day," she answered. "Federal hours of service rules give me a 14-hour window. I use it how I need to." Her voice carried no edge, just clarity. And for a brief moment, Ryan's jaw tightened, not because she was wrong, but because she was right in a way that left no room to push. Jake climbed down from the trailer, brushing his hands together lightly. "Everything inside looks clean," he said, quieter now, less certain than before. Ryan did not respond immediately, his attention shifting again, this time following the direction Danielle's eyes had flickered toward more than once. The dark SUV still sat at the edge of the lot, its windows tinted, its presence subtle but persistent, like a detail that refused to stay in the background once noticed. "You got someone waiting on you?" Ryan asked suddenly, nodding toward the vehicle. Danielle's eyes moved there again, just for a second, then back. "No," she said, simple, direct, and that was when something changed, not outside, not in the lights or the distant traffic, but in the space between them. A thin line of tension pulling tighter, Ryan exhaled slowly, his instincts pulling in two directions now. One telling him to close this out, move on, write it off as nothing. The other whispering that something deeper sat just beneath the surface, something he had not yet uncovered. And that voice was harder to ignore than he wanted it to be. Jake shifted again, glancing between them, sensing it too. We could clear her and roll, he offered, tentative, but Ryan shook his head once, small, decisive. Not yet, he said, then looked back at Danielle, his tone shifting just slightly, less forceful, more probing. Mind if I take a look inside the cab? Danielle held his gaze for a moment longer this time, the pause stretching just enough to be noticed, not defiant, not resistant, just deliberate, like she was measuring something he could not see. Then she gave a small nod. Go ahead, she said, stepping aside, and as Ryan moved toward the driver's side door, his eyes flicked once more toward the SUV, and for the first time, he noticed something he had missed before, the faint outline of a figure behind the wheel, still, watching, not intervening, not leaving, just waiting, and suddenly, without understanding why, the situation felt less like a routine stop and more like a line he had already crossed without realizing it. The driver's side door opened with a slow creak, the interior of the cab dimly lit by the faint glow of instrument panels and a small overhead bulb. Ryan paused for half a second before stepping up, his hand brushing against the metal frame as he pulled himself inside. The space was clean, not polished, but intentional, everything placed where it needed to be, logbook secured in its slot, a folded map tucked beside it, a half-empty thermos in the cup holder, nothing loose, nothing careless, the kind of order that did not match the picture he had built in his head. He leaned forward slightly, scanning the dashboard, then the passenger seat, then the small storage compartments above, each movement slower than before, more deliberate, like he was no longer searching for something specific, but trying to understand what he was missing. Outside, Jake remained near the trailer, arms crossed now, his posture less rigid, his attention split between Ryan in the cab and Danielle standing a few feet away. She had not moved much, just shifted her stance once, her eyes occasionally drifting toward the SUV, then back, never lingering long enough to draw attention, but never ignoring it either. The night seemed quieter now, the distant traffic fading into a low constant hum that felt almost distant, like the world beyond the rest stop had stepped back to watch. Ryan reached for the logbook, flipping it open, his fingers moving across the pages, checking entries, times, routes, everything aligned. Neat handwriting, consistent, no gaps, no rushed entries. He frowned slightly, not because anything was wrong, but because everything was right in a way that left no cracks to push through. You keep this updated yourself? He called out, his voice carrying from inside the cab. Danielle nodded once. Every stop, she replied, her tone unchanged. Ryan turned another page, then another, the faint sound of paper shifting in the quiet, his eyes narrowing as he slowed, something catching his attention, not a mistake, not an error, just a pattern, subtle, consistent, like a rhythm that had been maintained too carefully. He glanced toward the side mirror, catching a partial reflection of the lot behind him, and there it was again, that SUV, still in the same place, still not moving, and now, clearer than before, the silhouette inside, not slouched, not distracted, but upright, focused, watching. Ryan closed the logbook slowly, setting it back in place, then reached toward the glove compartment, hesitating for just a fraction of a second before opening it. Inside were standard documents, registration, insurance, nothing unusual, but tucked slightly beneath them was something else, a small, dark object, partially hidden. He did not pull it out right away, just looked at it, his mind running ahead, connecting pieces that did not fully fit yet. Outside, Jake shifted his weight again, glancing toward Danielle. You travel alone? He asked, more out of habit than suspicion now. Danielle met his eyes briefly. Most days, she said, and there was something in the way she said it, not defensive, not revealing, just enough to leave the sentence open, like there was more behind it that did not need to be spoken. Jake nodded slowly, looking back toward Ryan. Waiting, the air felt different now, tighter, like the moment was holding its breath. Inside the cab, Ryan finally reached for the object, his fingers brushing against its edge, and as he lifted it slightly into the light, His expression shifted, not dramatically, not enough for anyone outside to see, but enough for him to feel it, that quiet, unsettling realization that whatever this situation was, it was no longer simple, and whatever decision came next, it would not be something he could take back. Ryan held the object just beneath the overhead light, not lifting it fully into view yet, his fingers steady but slower now, as if the weight of it had already begun to settle somewhere deeper than his hand. It was a badge, compact, dark, the kind that did not shine unless it needed to, partially shielded by a leather fold that had kept it out of sight until this moment. He did not open it immediately, his eyes flicking once toward the side mirror again, catching that same SUV, that same still figure inside, and for the first time, the silence around the truck felt intentional, not empty. Outside, Jake took a step closer to the cab, sensing the shift without seeing it. "You find something?" he called up, his voice lower now, less certain. Ryan did not answer right away, his thumb pressing lightly against the edge of the leather, then pausing, like a decision was being made in real time. Danielle stood where she had been, her posture unchanged, but her attention now fixed more directly on Ryan, not tense, not urgent, just present, like she already knew the moment had arrived. The wind moved again, carrying a faint rustle across the lot, and somewhere in the distance a truck horn echoed briefly before fading into nothing. Ryan finally opened the badge, just enough to see the imprint inside, the lettering catching the dim light. Clear, unmistakable, his breath slowed, not sharp, not startled, but measured, controlled, the kind of reaction that came when the mind shifted from assumption to realization without wanting to show it. He closed it again just as quickly, the motion small, contained, then set it back exactly where he had found it, not hidden, but not displayed either. Outside, Jake waited, eyes moving between Ryan and Danielle. "Ryan?" he said again, quieter this time. Ryan stepped down from the cab, boots meeting the pavement with a softer impact than before, his posture no longer rigid, but not relaxed either, something in between, something. Recalibrating, he looked at Danielle, really looked now, not through her, not past her, but at her, and for a brief second, there was a gap, a space where certainty had been, now replaced by something else, something closer to awareness. "Everything checks out," he said finally, his voice even, but different, the edge gone, replaced by a careful neutrality. Jake blinked once, caught off guard. "That is it?" he asked, glancing toward the open trailer, then back. Ryan nodded once, small, controlled. "That is it," he repeated, and though the words were simple, the shift beneath them was not. Danielle held his gaze for a moment longer, her expression still calm, but now there was something else there, not satisfaction, not relief, just a quiet acknowledgement, like two people standing on opposite sides of something that had just been understood without being spoken. The SUV in the distance remained still, but now its presence felt less distant, less background, like a piece of the moment that had been waiting for its turn. Jake stepped back slightly, exhaling under his breath, the tension in his shoulders easing just enough to show. "All right," he muttered, turning toward the patrol car. Ryan did not move right away, his eyes still on Danielle, the question he had not asked sitting somewhere behind them, unspoken. And then, almost imperceptibly, Danielle gave the slightest nod, not approval, not permission, just recognition. And in that small, silent exchange, the balance of the moment shifted. Completely, not loud, not dramatic, but final in a way that could not be undone. The silence did not break all at once, it thinned, slowly, like tension leaking out of a sealed space. Jake moved first, walking back toward the patrol car with a glance over his shoulder, still trying to reconcile the shift he had just witnessed without fully understanding it. Ryan remained where he stood for a moment longer, his hands resting lightly at his sides, no longer positioned for control, no longer braced for confrontation. Just there, present, recalibrating. Danielle turned slightly toward the open trailer, her boots making a soft sound against the pavement as she stepped forward, reaching up to pull one of the heavy doors inward, the metal creaking as it closed. Then the other, sealing the cargo again with a firm, practiced motion. She secured the latch with a clean click, the sound small but final, like closing a chapter that had never needed to be opened. Ryan watched her do it, not interrupting, not directing, just observing, And in that observation, something in his posture softened, not outwardly, not enough for anyone passing by to notice, but enough that he felt it himself, the absence of pressure where there had been certainty before. "You are good to go," he said finally, the words simple, but now carrying a different weight, not authority, not dismissal, but acknowledgement. Danielle paused for a second, her hand still resting on the trailer latch, then nodded once. "Appreciate it," she replied, her voice calm, steady, the same tone she had carried from the beginning, but now it landed differently in the space between them. Ryan hesitated, just slightly, as if something else needed to be said, something that did not fit easily into the structure of procedure or protocol, but he did not find the words. Not yet. Jake opened the driver door of the patrol car, the interior, light flickering on briefly before dimming. He leaned inside, reaching for the radio. "Dispatch, we are clear," he said, his voice returning to routine, but lacking the earlier edge. The normal rhythm felt almost out of place now, like it belonged to a version of the moment that no longer existed. Danielle walked back toward her cab, her steps measured, unhurried, as if the entire encounter had taken place on a different layer of time than everything else around it. She reached the driver's side door and placed her hand on the handle, then paused, just for a second, her eyes lifting toward the far end of the lot. The SUV, still there, still silent, but now something inside it shifted, the faint outline of movement, subtle, controlled, not drawing attention, but no longer still. Ryan noticed it too this time, his gaze following hers without meaning to, the connection unspoken but shared, and for the first time, he understood that whatever this had been, it had not been random, not just a stop, not just a suspicion, but part of something larger, something he had stepped into without knowing. Danielle opened her door and climbed up into the cab, the motion smooth, practiced, as she settled into the seat, her hands returning to the wheel, the engine still idling beneath her, steady, reliable. She did not look back again, not at Ryan, not at the patrol car, just forward, toward the highway beyond the rest stop. Ryan stood there for another moment, the hum of the engine filling the quiet, and in that hum, something settled inside him. Not clarity, not fully, but the beginning of it, the realization that the story he had walked into was not the one he thought he was telling. And as Danielle's truck lights flickered slightly against the night, preparing to move, the space between what had been assumed and what had been real finally became impossible to ignore. The engine's low rumble deepened as Danielle adjusted her grip on the wheel, her foot easing onto the accelerator just enough to signal movement without committing to it, the headlights stretching forward across the pavement in long pale beams that cut through the stillness of the rest stop. Ryan remained standing near the rear of the truck, his eyes following the slow shift of the vehicle as it inched forward a few feet, then paused again, like a breath being taken before a decision. The moment did not feel finished, not yet, and he knew it, even if he could not explain why. Jake leaned against the open door of the patrol car, watching the truck with a slight frown. "You ever get that feeling?" he said, his voice low, almost casual, but edged with something uncertain. Ryan did not look at him. "What feeling?" he asked, though he already knew. Jake shrugged lightly. "Like you just walked into something bigger than the report said," he replied. Ryan exhaled slowly, his gaze still fixed ahead, the SUV at the edge of the lot now more present than before, its engine coming to life with a quiet ignition that barely carried across the space, but was enough to be noticed if you were listening for it. Danielle saw it too, her eyes flicking toward the rearview mirror, catching the subtle movement, the alignment of timing that confirmed what she had already calculated long before this stop began. Her hands remained steady on the wheel, no sudden movements, no signals, just continuation. The truck rolled forward another few feet, the tires crunching softly against gravel as she guided it toward the exit lane. Ryan's posture shifted again, not tense, but alert in a different way now. Less about control, more about awareness. He took a step forward, then stopped, as if crossing that invisible line again would mean stepping into something he no longer fully understood. "Ryan," Jake said quietly. "You want to call it in?" Ryan shook his head once, small, deliberate. "No," he said, and the word carried more weight than it should have, because it was not just about the call. It was about letting the moment go, or at least choosing not to chase it further. Danielle's truck reached the edge of the lot, her turn signal clicking softly inside the cab, a steady rhythm that matched her breathing. One blink, then another, then she eased onto the access road, merging toward the highway with smooth precision, the kind that came from thousands of miles behind the wheel. The SUV waited a second longer, then pulled out as well, keeping a careful distance, not too close, not too far, just enough to remain unseen by anyone who was not paying attention. Ryan watched both vehicles as they moved away, the pattern forming in his mind now. Not clear, but undeniable. This had not been random, not entirely, and whatever it was, it had just continued beyond him. Jake closed the patrol car door with a soft thud, stepping around to the driver's side. "So that is it?" he asked, glancing back once more at the road where the truck's taillights had already begun to fade into the distance. Ryan did not answer right away, his eyes still fixed on that disappearing line of red light, the night swallowing it piece by piece until it became just another part of the highway, indistinguishable from everything else. "Yeah," he said finally, but his voice lacked certainty, because even as he said it, he knew it was not the end of anything, just the point where his part in it stopped. And somewhere out there, beyond the reach of his patrol zone, beyond the boundaries of what he had assumed, something was still unfolding, something he had almost interrupted without ever realizing it. And that realization stayed with him, quiet, persistent, long after the lights of the rest stop returned to their ordinary, empty glow. The highway stretched out in long, unbroken lines of asphalt, the glow of overhead signs flickering past in steady intervals as Danielle guided the truck into the flow of late-night traffic, her speed holding just under 65 miles per hour, consistent, controlled. The kind of pace that blended in without drawing attention. In the side mirror, the rest stop lights had already faded into a distant blur, replaced by the steady rhythm of headlights and taillights moving in parallel streams. Behind her, far enough to remain unnoticeable to most, the dark SUV merged smoothly into the same lane, maintaining a careful distance of several car lengths, its presence subtle, deliberate. Danielle's eyes flicked to the mirror once, then forward again, her expression unchanged, but her focus sharpened, not on the road ahead alone, but on everything around it, every movement, every shift in spacing, every detail that could not be left to chance. The cabin was quiet except for the low hum of the engine and the soft clicking of the turn signal resetting itself. She reached toward the dashboard, pressing a small, almost invisible button beneath the panel, the motion quick, practiced, and then her hand returned to the wheel as if nothing had changed. But something had, beneath the surface, beneath what could be seen. The SUV behind her adjusted slightly, closing the gap by a fraction, then easing back again, mirroring her pace without matching it exactly, a dance of distance that required precision, not force, the kind that relied on patience more than speed. Miles passed in steady increments, the road curving gently through stretches of dark forest and open highway, occasional trucks appearing and fading beside her, each one just another part of the landscape, nothing out of place, nothing unusual, and that was the point. Everything needed to look ordinary. Even when it was not, Danielle's breathing remained even, her posture relaxed but engaged, every sense tuned not to react, but to anticipate. The faint vibration of her phone, secured in a mount near the dash, broke the rhythm for a moment. She glanced at the screen without turning her head fully, a single line of text appearing briefly before dimming again. No sound, no alert. Just confirmation. She did not respond, did not reach for it. Just let it settle into the flow of what was already happening. Behind her, the SUV maintained its position, its headlights steady, its movement controlled, and somewhere beyond that, unseen but present, other vehicles moved within the same network, each playing a role that did not need to be spoken. The night air outside remained still, the sky wide and empty above the highway, stars faint against the distant glow of city lights on the horizon. Danielle adjusted her grip slightly, her fingers tightening for just a second before relaxing again. The road ahead remained clear, but the moment carried weight now, not heavy, not overwhelming, just precise, like standing on the edge of something that required exact timing, exact awareness, no room for error. And as the miles continued to pass, the line between routine and purpose blurred completely. leaving only the quiet certainty that what had started back at the rest stop had not ended. It had only moved forward, deeper into a space where every second mattered, even if no one outside it could see why. The highway narrowed slightly as construction cones began to appear along the shoulder, their reflective bands catching Danielle's headlights in rhythmic flashes, orange and white repeating like a quiet signal. She eased off the accelerator just enough to let her speed drop to 60. Blending into the subtle slowdown of traffic ahead, her eyes moved once to the mirror, then forward again, calculating distance, timing. The SUV behind her adjusted almost instantly, maintaining its position with careful precision, neither gaining nor falling back, just present, controlled, the pattern now unmistakable. Danielle reached toward the dashboard again, this time resting her fingers lightly against the edge without pressing anything. Waiting, listening, the faint vibration of the engine shifting as the road inclined slightly upward, a gentle grade that forced larger trucks to adjust their pace. A perfect place for movement if it needed to happen. The lane to her left opened briefly, a gap, forming between two passing vehicles, then closing again. The kind of fleeting opportunity that most drivers ignored, but not tonight. Not here. Danielle's breathing slowed further, her focus narrowing, not tense, but exact, the kind of attention that filtered out everything unnecessary. The radio remained silent. No music, no chatter, just the low mechanical hum of motion behind her. The SUV's headlights flickered slightly as it crossed over a seam in the pavement, then steadied again, its driver maintaining the same careful rhythm. But now there was a second presence, subtle, emerging from farther back, another set of lights, dim at first, then clearer, aligning into the same flow of traffic, but not quite matching the pattern. Danielle noticed it immediately, not with a visible reaction, but with a shift so small it would have gone unseen by anyone not looking for it. Her right hand adjusted the wheel by a fraction of an inch, centering the truck within the lane with deliberate precision. The space ahead began to compress slightly as brake lights flickered on in the distance, a ripple effect moving backward through the line of vehicles. Danielle responded early, easing down smoothly, avoiding the abruptness that would draw attention. The SUV followed, matching her deceleration, but the second vehicle behind it hesitated, its timing just a fraction off, just enough to stand out in a system built on synchronization. Danielle's eyes moved again to the mirror, then forward, confirming, not reacting. The situation had shifted, not dramatically, but enough. The controlled pattern now contained an unknown variable, and that changed everything. The incline leveled out, the road straightened, and for a brief moment, the traffic flow stabilized again, but the presence remained. That second vehicle holding its place, not aggressive, not careless, just slightly out of rhythm, and in a sequence where every movement was measured. That was all it took. Danielle adjusted her speed again, bringing it back up by 2 miles per hour, just enough to test the response. The SUV mirrored her perfectly, but the vehicle behind it lagged, then corrected, a beat too late, confirmation without words. The operation, whatever it was, had just entered a new phase, one where control would need to be re-established, not through force, but through precision. Danielle's hand moved once more, this time pressing the small button beneath the dash. A single click, silent to anyone else, but decisive, and as she returned her hand to the wheel, her posture remained calm, her expression unchanged, the road ahead still open, still ordinary, but now carrying a different weight, a different meaning, and somewhere behind her, within the shifting alignment of headlights, the balance between known and unknown had tilted, not enough to break, but enough to matter. The road ahead opened into a long, straight stretch, the construction zone fading behind her as the cones thinned out and the lanes widened again. Danielle let the truck settle back into a steady 63 miles per hour, her foot light on the pedal, her hands relaxed but precise, every adjustment measured, every movement intentional. The night air outside remained still, but inside the cab, the atmosphere had shifted, not visibly, not audibly, but in the quiet alignment of decisions being made in real time. She glanced once more at the side mirror. The SUV remained locked in its position, its headlights steady, disciplined, but the second vehicle behind it was still there, still slightly off, not enough to alarm, but enough to confirm. The delay in its response is no longer subtle, now consistent. Danielle's fingers tapped once against the steering wheel, not nervous, not impatient, just a signal. To herself, a marker in the flow of time. She adjusted her speed again, dropping by 2 miles per hour, then holding, watching. The SUV matched instantly, smooth, controlled, but the trailing vehicle corrected late again, a fraction of a second behind, enough to stand out in a system built on synchronization, confirmation. Her eyes moved forward, scanning the road ahead. An exit sign appeared in the distance, green and reflective, indicating a service ramp 2 miles ahead. She did not change lanes, did not signal, just noted it, calculated, stored it. The truck continued forward, blending into the rhythm of passing vehicles. Nothing about her movement drawing attention, everything about it deliberate. Beneath the dashboard, a faint indicator light blinked once, then went dark again, a silent acknowledgement that something had been received, somewhere beyond the visible scene. The network had adjusted, not dramatically, not visibly, but enough. The SUV behind her shifted slightly, moving half a lane to the left, then returning, a subtle repositioning, creating a new angle, a new line of sight. Danielle saw it, registered it, her breathing unchanged, her posture steady. The second vehicle behind them closed the gap by a small margin, then hesitated again, its timing inconsistent, its presence now fully defined, not part of the pattern, but intersecting with it. The highway curved gently to the right, the guardrail reflecting the headlights in a continuous ribbon of light. Danielle eased into the curve, maintaining her lane with exact precision, the truck responding smoothly, the weight balanced, controlled. The SUV followed perfectly, its movement clean, intentional, but the trailing vehicle drifted slightly wider before correcting. Another small deviation, another confirmation. Danielle's right hand moved again, pressing the button beneath the dash once more, the click inaudible, but decisive. And as her hand returned to the wheel, the road ahead remained unchanged, just asphalt and light and distance. But the moment had shifted again, the balance tightening, the variables narrowing. Somewhere ahead, beyond the visible horizon, the next phase was already waiting. And as the exit sign grew closer, its reflective letters becoming clearer with each passing second, Danielle did not look at it directly, but she knew exactly when and how it would matter, because in a sequence where every detail carried weight, timing was not just important, it was everything, and whatever came next would not be a reaction. It would be a choice already made long before the moment arrived. The exit sign drew closer, its green surface reflecting brighter now, the white letters sharp against the darkness as Danielle maintained her lane without signaling, without committing, just holding the line as if the decision had not yet been made. But her eyes had already measured the distance, already counted the seconds. The truck remained steady at 63 miles per hour, the engine humming low and constant beneath her. Behind her, the SUV adjusted slightly again, its position tightening just enough to prepare, not reacting, not rushing, just aligning. The second vehicle lingered farther back now, its timing still off, its presence no longer subtle but not yet disruptive. Danielle's fingers tightened briefly on the wheel, then relaxed. The faint indicator beneath the dashboard blinked once more, a silent confirmation, the kind that did not need sound to carry meaning. The road ahead remained clear, the exit lane beginning to branch off slowly to the right, its curve gentle, inviting, ordinary to anyone not paying attention. Danielle waited, 1 second, 2, then eased her foot slightly off the accelerator, letting the truck lose just enough speed to create a natural opening. No signal yet, no sudden movement, just a shift in pace. The SUV behind her responded instantly, drifting slightly to the left lane, creating space, not crowding, not following too closely, just repositioning with quiet precision. The second vehicle hesitated again, its headlights flickering as it adjusted late, caught between lanes, uncertain for a fraction too long. And that was all it took. Danielle turned on her signal, one clean click, then guided the truck smoothly into the exit lane. No rush, no hesitation, just a controlled transition, the tires rolling over the painted line with a soft vibration, the curve of the ramp taking hold as the highway peeled away behind her. The SUV did not follow immediately, It held its position on the main road for one more second, then two, maintaining the illusion of separation, before easing over into the exit lane as well, its movement clean, calculated. The second vehicle reacted late again, swerving slightly to catch the ramp, its timing now clearly broken, no longer part of the pattern. Danielle adjusted her speed further, dropping to 45 miles per hour as the ramp curved downward, the streetlights here spaced farther apart, casting long shadows across the pavement, the world narrowing, quieter, more contained. Her eyes moved once to the mirror, confirming positions, the SUV now directly behind her at a controlled distance, the second vehicle farther back, still present, still following, but no longer synchronized. The environment had changed, and with it, the rules. Danielle reached toward the dashboard again, pressing the hidden button one final time. The motion small, decisive, and as her hand returned to the wheel, something shifted, not in the truck, not in the road, but in the moment itself, the uncertainty narrowing, the variables aligning, the next phase no longer waiting somewhere ahead, but unfolding now, right here, in the quiet curve of an exit ramp where everything looked ordinary and nothing was. The ramp leveled out into a quiet service road lined with dim streetlights and long stretches of empty pavement, the kind of place where movement felt slower, more exposed. Danielle eased the truck down to 35 miles per hour, her hands steady on the wheel as the engine settled into a softer rhythm, the hum lower now, less forceful. Behind her the SUV followed at a measured distance, no longer blending into highway traffic, but clearly present within the same narrowed space. The second vehicle appeared at the top of the ramp a moment later, its headlights cresting into view before dipping down as it committed to the turn, its timing still imperfect, still just slightly off. Danielle's eyes moved to the mirror, then forward again, calculating. The road ahead stretched straight for nearly half a mile, before reaching a small intersection, a single blinking yellow light hanging above it, casting a slow pulse across the asphalt. She did not accelerate, did not slow further, just held her pace, letting the spacing behind her define itself. The SUV adjusted once, closing the gap by a car length, then holding, its presence now more active, more engaged. The second vehicle followed, but again with that same delayed correction, drifting slightly before settling into line. Danielle's right hand moved once more toward the dashboard, but this time she did not press the button. She simply rested her fingers there, waiting. The truck rolled forward, the intersection growing closer, the blinking light reflecting in the windshield in steady intervals, one pulse, then another, each one marking time without urgency, as if the moment itself had slowed to match her pace. The SUV's headlights shifted slightly, angling just enough to illuminate more of the road ahead, its driver now fully committed to the sequence. Whatever it was, the second vehicle remained behind, but its presence felt different now, less controlled, more reactive, as if it had followed too far to turn back, but had not fully understood what it had entered. Danielle exhaled slowly, her posture unchanged, her focus exact. The truck reached the intersection, the tires rolling over the worn paint of the stop line, and for a brief second, everything aligned, the spacing, the timing, the positions. The SUV slowed behind her, matching her pace perfectly. The second vehicle approached, closing the distance more quickly now, its earlier hesitation replaced by a subtle urgency. Danielle lifted her foot slightly, letting the truck coast, not stopping fully, not yet, just holding the moment in suspension. The blinking light reflected again across the windshield, then faded, and in that quiet space between movement and stillness, something shifted, not visibly, not dramatically, but with a certainty that settled into the air itself. The SUV's engine note changed slightly, a low adjustment that carried just enough to be felt rather than heard. And from somewhere beyond the edges of the visible road, additional headlights began to emerge, faint at first, then clearer, not rushing, not flashing, just arriving, one by one, aligning into the same quiet geometry of the moment. Danielle did not look toward them, did not react. She simply held the wheel, her eyes forward, her breathing even, as the intersection, the road, and the vehicles around her transformed from ordinary space into something else entirely, something structured, controlled, and no longer uncertain. Because whatever had been building since the rest stop had now reached its point of clarity, not through noise or force, but through the quiet precision of timing finally coming together exactly as it was meant to. The blinking yellow light continued its steady pulse above the intersection, casting brief washes of gold across the hood of the truck as Danielle finally let the vehicle come to a complete stop, the engine idling low beneath her, steady, controlled, her hands resting lightly on the wheel, not gripping, not tense, just present. The SUV behind her slowed in perfect sync, coming to a smooth stop at a measured distance, its headlights illuminating the rear of her trailer without crowding it. And then the second vehicle arrived, faster than before, its tires rolling over the pavement with a slight urgency that broke the quiet rhythm of everything else. It slowed late, stopping farther back than it should have, its alignment imperfect, its timing no longer disguised. And in that small miscalculation, the difference became undeniable. From the edges of the road, where darkness had held its shape just moments before, other vehicles began to appear, not abruptly, not with flashing lights or raised voices, but with quiet precision, headlights turning, engines humming low as they positioned themselves with careful intent, forming a loose perimeter that felt less like a confrontation and more like a structure finally revealing itself. Danielle did not move right away, her eyes forward, her breathing even, as if this had already been accounted for, already completed in a version of time that came before this one. The SUV behind her shifted slightly, its driver door opening with a soft, controlled motion, a figure stepping out, posture upright, movements calm, no rush, no hesitation, just presence. And then another vehicle's door opened, and another, each one adding to the shape of the moment without disrupting its silence. The second vehicle remained still, its headlights fixed, its position now enclosed within a space it had not anticipated, the imbalance it carried earlier now fully exposed. Danielle's hand moved at last, not toward the dashboard this time, but toward the side of her seat, reaching briefly before returning. And then she opened her door, the hinges giving a quiet creak as she stepped down onto the pavement, her boots landing softly, her posture straight, composed. She did not look toward the surrounding vehicles immediately. Instead, she turned slightly, just enough to face the SUV behind her, the figure there meeting her gaze, a small nod passing between them, not dramatic, not ceremonial, just acknowledgement, the kind that required no explanation. Around them, the scene remained calm, controlled, the night unchanged except for the quiet arrangement of vehicles and people now occupying it. The second vehicle did not move, did not attempt to leave, its stillness now part of the structure rather than separate from it. Danielle took one slow breath, her shoulders settling, the weight of the moment shifting from anticipation to completion. And in that transition, everything became clear, not in words, not in declarations, but in the quiet understanding of what had just unfolded, far from the rest stop, far from the assumptions that had started it all. The truth had not needed to announce itself. It had simply revealed itself through timing, through patience, through the steady presence of someone who had never needed to prove who she was, only to be seen. And as the blinking light continued above them, marking seconds that no longer mattered, Danielle stood there in the center of it, not as someone who had been questioned, not as someone who had been followed, but as someone who had guided the entire moment exactly where it needed to be, without ever raising her voice, without ever stepping out of the quiet strength she carried from the very beginning.